Welcome to the ThunderCast, your martial athletics podcast produced by the fans, for the fans, with your hosts, Russ Livingood and Jed Horton. We're bringing you the thundering word on the thundering herd each and every week, so keep it right here because the ThunderCast is on the loose. Welcome back to another episode of the ThunderCast. Jet and I just recorded the one that you watched or listened to a couple of days ago, but we are back with a special mailbag edition. Jet, we haven't done this in a long time, so we're going to get into this. But as always, we have to start with a word from our sponsors, Leasure Oliver PLLC. If you've been hurt in a wreck, call the law firm of Leasure Oliver PLLC. Found them at 304carwreck.com. All right, man. Like I said, it's been a long time. Can't forget that. I had my mic over again. You need to reach through the screen and smack me when I do that. But been a long time since we've done a mailbag. And first time for you, if I'm not mistaken. But KD and I did these every once in a while. And what better time before he and I start our resumption of the position group breakdowns, which is coming up very, very soon, that we're going to start that. We wanted to kind of do a little heat check on how everybody's thinking about several different topics. And we got some from Facebook, a lot from Twitter, and we've got some good questions here that we're going to go over. And this is sponsored by Layer 1 Solutions, your experts in business connectivity infrastructure, bringing you the ThunderCast mailbag. All right, Jed, let's scroll these across the bottom and go question by question.
All righty.
All right, so when will we get an announcement on who the new AD will be? I feel, and this is totally my opinion, that we're going to have over the next 2 weeks probably a final three. I think that we've whittled it down by that point. And I have always said, since the announcement came that we would not be retaining Christian Spears, that the conference schedule, the annual calendar year for the conference, starts on July 1st. And that is coincidentally, we do our season starts over there. So we are rapidly approaching that. It's less than a month, right at 3 weeks away. I think that we will have it down to 3 by then. And before the football season, probably early in camp, early in August, we're going to have our person. I don't see us going into football season without an athletic director. I originally had thought that we would have already named our top 3 and that by July the 1st, starting that calendar year, that we would have someone there for that position named already by July the 1st. Now that it's 3 weeks away, it could still be done. You know, we could whittle it down to 3, and a week later we could have our person. But I just kind of get the feeling it'll be August now. But if you do that, you're missing out on SBC football days, media days, which is in July. Not having your athletic director go there, you would have an interim or the current, as I believe Christian Spears would still be doing that. But I just kind of get the feeling it's going to be August, but before the season. What do you think? Anything different?
Yeah, that to me makes the most logical sense. Because again, it's whenever you get a new coach in your football program or a new coach in your basketball program, timing matters, right? Now it doesn't matter as much, I would guess, with the AD, since they're not really recruiting, but the AD is responsible for, working with other ADs at other universities to get future games and things like that. And the sooner they hit the ground running on that kind of stuff, the better, especially like you said, you got the fiscal year coming up in July. you've got the next, you guys are starting position, group breakdowns. I mean, it's, when summer hits, fall's coming fast. And
It's
so,
coming quick.
yeah, I'd say if, this is a pure guess, it's got to be something along the lines of what you said. If I had to guess, that makes the most sense to me. I mean, it can be anything, but I would guess that that's probably going to be the case.
We are both kind of in agreement that this is not going to be something that, even though his contract runs through March of 2026, we're not going to see him continue in this role with someone coming in, say, February or March of 2026.
Yeah,
We think that it'll happen, this year, right?
I think so. Yeah, that makes the most sense. Again, because contract ends kind of in a weird time, and
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have to bring somebody in anyway, and it's better to start with the fresh slate, right? Clean slate rather. Starting into the 25-26 season.
That's why that conference calendar year was always sticking out in my head. But one thing is, you don't want to rush this. You want to make a home run hire, and I think that's probably what we're going to see.
Yeah. I'll read the next question, Russ. Maybe we can alternate, go back and
Sure.
forth. So next question we got here is, will we see more additions to the football roster before fall camp?
Yes. Yes, I do. We just saw one this past week, Pete Shue coming over from Oklahoma, and I think that you'll see some of those peppered throughout the summer. I think that what you're probably not going to see is, hey, we're bringing in a 4-star grad transfer quarterback that is just going to upend the quarterback room. That is where I don't see a big surprise, because that was a part of that question too, that Brad asked, if there would be any more surprises. I do think that it's not unheard of that we bring in a surprise or two. I mean, we may already have them. If this is anything like, Coach Huff, who is not here anymore, and it's not like we want to keep going back to things he said, but he did have a good perspective on how this transfer portal and NIL situation in today's landscape goes. And he told us on this show before that sometimes it is best to not announce those players officially until they have enrolled. And once they are enrolled, they are past that ad drop period. So they are kind of tied to us. So I don't think that it would be unheard of that we see, a defensive lineman, a linebacker, another defensive back, definitely some special teams depth, a playmaker on the offense. I just don't see it being a name quarterback that we're going to get, because remember, unless they are in the portal right now already from April that have not been picked up, they have to be a grad transfer that can enter at any time. And then the only other option is if a coach leaves. So if a coach resigns, is fired, goes to another school, and there's not like there's a lot of openings right now, if any, that they would then be allowed 30 days to take it enter. So the pickings are getting slimmer, but there are still quite a few players out there from every level that are in the portal right now that we could choose from. So yes, I do think that we add before the fall.
Yeah, and I think last year was proof of that. And you referenced Coach Huff. I mean, that's there were some players that popped there. I don't remember off the top of my head who maybe you do. I don't have the photographic memory, but maybe there were some ones. But yeah, but I do recall that was that's a bit of a strategy, especially when someone's like, yeah, maybe I need a third string here, and I want to throw some NIL money to somebody and try to pluck somebody out of here before they get past that ad drop date. But I'm with you. It's probably similar to last season, if I had to guess.
Yeah, I don't have those names off the top of my head either. I know the past couple of seasons we picked up. I remember Jace Bobo, a linebacker, I think 2 seasons ago, we picked him up and it was midsummer. There were a couple that we picked up that were later, and you can, you think about the first week of the semester, and I don't know when that is, but it's before the football game on August the 30th. But that first week of the semester, that Friday is the ad drop day. So let's just throw out, I don't even know if these match up date wise, but August 18th is the first day of the fall semester at Marshall. And you've got then through 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, August 22nd would be that Friday. So you could take someone up until August 22nd and they could add that day, and then they are enrolled. And once they're enrolled, then you're looking at a totally different animal. But you could have them in here on August the 17th, and that first week, technically, they could drop and they could go add somewhere else if they've got the same schedule. So we're probably not wanting to announce everybody on there, but yeah, I would say we're going to pick up a few more. Big surprises, maybe, just not the big, like, oh my gosh, this totally changes everything about our program.
Yeah.
All right.
Possible, but unlikely. I'd say, right?
Next question, I think, if we're on the same thing here, is now that we're back recruiting the Eastern Panhandle for football, will we see basketball and baseball coming here and showing interest in our talent? Interesting point. I think that it is up to the style of the coaches and their recruiting hotbeds. Coach Gibson was always recruiting West Virginia. He was always a mainstay at these schools around here. Grant Traylor, who is now on the admin side, but previously was a reporter, has recalled many stories of talking to Coach Gibson while he was there covering the high school games, and he would see him there watching and recruiting and things like that. So I think it's a slightly different animal. That's where his, the entire state and the regions around here, he's got a lot of contacts. So it was natural for him to come back here. Baseball, Coach Beals is more entrenched in that Ohio area. He was there for a long, long time. Got a lot of contacts up there. Not to say that he's not going elsewhere, but the Eastern Panhandle, he may not have those contacts up there. It might not be because he doesn't want to recruit up there. It might just be that his natural recruiting zone and territory is elsewhere due to the contacts and pipelines that he has. I think Coach Jackson right now is leaning heavily on Rob Fulford, who is more of that. Right now, Canada is big for us, but that AAU, those prep schools and things, is where he had his names and contacts and pipelines. So I don't think it's unheard of for us to go up there, but I just think that it's a totally different animal because of how Coach Gibson already had his fingerprints all over that area for pipeline.
Yeah, which is always important when you're recruiting. Or when you're not recruiting, but when you're interviewing a coach, right? Mm-hmm. Is what kind of contacts do they have? Where have they previously been? Mm-hmm. Same thing, kind of go back to the athletic director thing, where did they work before? Who's right. Your contacts? How do you, because that matters. You're going to be able to, get a conversation with somebody, or you're going to have to go through 2 or 3 people before you actually get there. So, I have to say I'm not educated enough to provide a good answer to that question, but that to me makes sense. It's all going to be based on where your history is, where your contacts are, who you're making contacts are. And if it makes sense to go in that direction and you've got people to pull against there, then I don't see why they wouldn't from at least geographical standpoint.
Yeah. Let's put it in context of Grassy and soccer. He is much more likely to pull from the international ranks from where someone is playing for a club that would be considered basically professional here, and has been for a couple of years. And it's totally different than playing in any area of West Virginia. I think that it would be dependent on the coach again in that pipeline. So, if you think about it that way, Bills is going to go where he's comfortable and has that pipeline. Is there a lot of talent in that Eastern Panhandle? Oh, yes. And it's in all sports. Brad, who asked this question, has been up there for decades, and he knows and has seen, and we've seen, kids going to other schools, kids going professional, Tyson Bagent, playing in the NFL right now, played up there. And there's a wealth of talent up there. So great question. I just feel like it's more of we returned up there because of Gibson more than we returned up there because an overall athletic department focus on that area.
Makes sense. All right. Online pundits are picking Marshall dead last in the Sun Belt. On a scale of 1 to 10, how ignorant are they?
Well, let's see. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd say they
55.
ignorant. They ignorant. Ignorant.
I'm a homebody as much as the next Marshall fan. I get that. I get that. But dead last is just, it's stupid.
It's stupid. It's stupid. And what's stupid about it is like they didn't give like their game by game, but somebody else did. And there's a guy. So who we're talking about here, CF Budge was the one that picked us last. And, he got hammered by, rightfully so, by everyone on Twitter that is a Herd proponent, and some that are not Herd fans, were like, man, I don't know what you're talking about. I hate giving them, one, I doubt the guy watches this show because looks like he doesn't watch much football anywhere, with what I've seen. Let's talk about him first, and then I want to talk about somebody else. So you talked about my memory, and I appreciate that. I feel like I do have a good memory.
You do better than mine.
Let's talk about CF Budge and what he thought about the 2024 Sun Belt Conference, just like he did for the 2025. And let's just see how well he did last year. If this is a, hey, you can't prove that you won't be last until it happens, let's just go ahead and talk about how he did for last year. Here is 1 through 14 who he had last year, just real quick. And this was his way too early 2024 Sun Belt Power rankings, earlier than it is right now in the season. But he had Texas State number 1. He had Appalachian State number 2, JMU number 3, Georgia Southern number 4, Troy number 5, South Alabama number 6, Old Dominion 7, Coastal 8, Arkansas State 9, Marshall at 10. Seems like they may have won the conference championship last year, but anyway, number 11, the people that we played, the team that we played in the conference championship, Louisiana. 12, Southern Miss. 13, Georgia State. And 14, ULM. Then he comes back that was February the 5th. So he comes back in June of last year. And here was who he said the non-bowl teams would be in 2024. Jed, how many games does a team have to win to be bowl eligible?
That is 6 games.
6 games. So he had Georgia State, Marshall, Southern Miss, which he did call that one, South Alabama, and ULM. And he had the title game being Appalachian State at Texas State, with Texas State winning. That was June the 18th of 2024. The guy didn't do well last year. I don't think that he's going to do well this year. No one at Marshall is saying, we're going to repeat back-to-back. It's a lock. You're stupid. Why won't you have us number 1 instead of number 14? No one's hitting him with that. We're just saying, dude, you obviously aren't following all of the people.
Right.
You can't. I can't go out here and follow 136 teams.
Right.
I can't tell you if you gave me said, hey, I'll give you $1 million if you can name every starting quarterback, the most important, most high profile position for 136 teams. If you can name all starters for 136, I couldn't do it. I probably couldn't Google and still do it, because there's a lot of players out there that might be looking at being the starter. Come week 3, they are not the starter. So this guy is just like a bunch of other people. They want to get engagement. So they are going to put these lists out, and they have a fancy, nice little blue check right beside their name. And that makes them look like they are someone previously you had to be a credentialed media person or a known entity. You don't have to do that anymore. All you got to do is pay $8 a month. You can put that check beside your name, and you can look like you know what you're talking about. Newsflash, this guy doesn't.
He obviously does not. Yeah.
There is another guy, Throne Spud, who I think I've got that right. Don't really give a damn if I do. He had us at 2-10. Losing to Georgia, winning against Missouri State, winning against Eastern Kentucky, and then losing every single game after that, Middle Tennessee State, and then all 8 Sun Belt Conference games. 2-10 with only 1 FBS win. So why do these two think this? Why does other pundits out there think this? Because they saw that we had a bunch of people go into the transfer portal. They don't go to ThunderCast.Online and see how many players that we had coming in, the coaching staff that we had coming in. Last year, I'm sure they looked at the same thing as, oh, they had a bunch of people hit the transfer portal. They lost their starting quarterback. They lost Rasheen Ali. They're not going to be good. What did we do? We went 9-3, and we were very close to going 10-2. A lot of people argued that we were really close to going 11-1. And I think we did okay. So am I worried what guys like this say? No, but it's clickbait. It's engagement bait. And they do that because, man, if I put on there that your favorite team is going to go winless this year, how many people are going to get on there and start telling me I'm an idiot? Well, I get money for every time, if I've got that blue check beside my name, every time somebody clicks on it, every time somebody comments on it, and it drives the views up, I'm getting money back in my bank account. Why would I care if I go through and be accurate if I can just put out whatever and I know that it's going to get the same engagement?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's what they're doing. And anybody with half a brain would know that, again, like I said, I'm a homer. I'm not going to say, we're going to go down to Georgia and we're going to stomp them. We're going to beat them by 20 and show them what's up.
That's right.
I'd love to, we know how this plays. We want to give them a game. We'd love to pull that upset if we can. We'd also know the reality of our situation, so, for a team to go undefeated is very difficult, no matter what level you are. Even if you dump $25 million into building your team, Ohio State, it's very difficult to go undefeated, especially when you play a team, up north. But so to predict, so I'm not going to say and predict, we're going undefeated, national football champions this year. Respectably, I don't see why we couldn't get to at least a bowl game this year. I don't want to definitely go down too deep in the rabbit hole with this, but I think a bowl game is definitely attainable. I think we'll be competitive in games. I think we'll surprise some people, but I'm not going to stand here and say that we're going to win every single game and do that. But to call us, I think it's just equally as stupid to call, say that Marshall's going to go 2-10 too. I think that's just as dumb as saying we're going undefeated and
it is
planting the flag on that.
Well, so I'm not going to get into, because we're going to have a prediction show, here later this summer, and it's going to be closer to the season. That's traditionally our very final of the position group breakdown. We do just a rundown of where we think it was going to be. Last year, we were pretty much right on nail on the head, 9-3. We at the Thundercast, I'm talking about KD and I, we've been the ones that were doing this. We have come very close every year because we follow this team so intricately. Now, I can predict whatever in the hell I think that we're going to do, and I could have very good reasons to back that up. And you're going to win some games that you shouldn't have. You're going to lose some games that you shouldn't have. And all of a sudden, that schedule might not turn out that way. But we had them. We had the out of conference, the exact same. We broke it down into thirds: the first 4 games, the middle 4 games, and the last 4 games. And we hit them on the head last year. Are we going to do that every year? Abso-freaking-lutely not. But I think that I might know a little bit more about Marshall than CF Budge,
Right.
or Throne Spud, or just about anybody that's not someone like Phil Steele, who is like actually interviewing coaches, actually going through all the roster stuff and putting all that out in magazine form and as unbiased as he can be, rather than Phil Steele doesn't need to go out and do engagement. He doesn't need to. He's got it anyway because he's Phil Steele and he's put in the work. Am I saying that we're on that level? No, that's laughable to think that we are. But I'm not going to do the prediction. But I do want to say, does 4-8 sound like that could happen? It could. I'm not saying that's where we're going to go. Does 4-8 sound like it would be dead last in the Sun Belt? No. I think that you've got to be below 4-8 to be dead last in the Sun Belt. So they're basically saying 3-9, 2-10, 1-11. That's laughable, man. That is crazy. Southern Miss went 1-11 last year. 1-11. The one game they won was against FCS. So are they saying that similarly we're going to do that this year to finish dead last? No. 2-10 by Throne Spud? No. I think it's idiotic. And again, my official answer to that question is they ignite. All right. Next question comes in, says, who do you think emerges from this offense as our fallback player this year for football? Do you, Jed Horton, have a name that pops out before I give my answer?
I'll be honest, not right off the top of my head. I think there are some unknowns. There's been a lot of moving pieces. I've had a lot of transfer out. Off the top of my head, I don't have a name that just comes shooting right out at me. I think that's open field here, but that's just my opinion.
This question is so difficult. And the reason it is because there are so many new moving parts, like you said. But I'm going to try, in the interest of fairness, to answer this question. They took the time to ask the question. I think it's a great question. So I am going to try to answer Kyle Hamlin's question. And I'm going to say my reasoning is it's not going to be an offensive lineman. Let's just go ahead and take offensive line out of the equation. Yeah. That's usually not the fallback. I mean, someone has to be like a generational player to be like, hey, that is your dependable offensive guy, Mm-hmm. Number 2 is, I think, even though there is a lot of potential for someone from the receiving core, whether it's wide receiver or tight end, to be that player, and we could see that, I find it less likely because someone has to get that person the ball. And if they are doing that, then a lot of shine goes on to that quarterback for doing that. Obviously, if you have an elite wide receiver, elite tight end, you don't have to have necessarily an amazing quarterback. But generally, that's not the only player. If they're throwing to that player, they're also throwing and running and getting accolades elsewhere. So that just brings the quarterback up. So I'm going to eliminate the receiving core. That leaves running backs, and I feel like we are going to be more of a by the committee type deal. Instead of having one workhorse, I think that we're going to have a stable of 3, possibly even more that gets into the mix, but we're definitely going to have 2, and we're probably going to have 3, and we're going to run a lot. I think that it is harder to have one of those be that standout, just absolute MVP. So that falls down to whoever ends up at QB1. And right now it looks like that's Carlos Del Rio Wilson. I feel like all of that explaining could be totally wrong. It could be anybody, but that is why, Kyle, I am picking Carlos Del Rio Wilson to be that fallback player due to mainly process of elimination and my belief that as of right now in June, before we've even done the position group breakdowns, we haven't been in fall camp. We always do quarterback as the last week, and that allows, the competition throughout the fall. He might not be the starting quarterback. Right now, I feel like he is coming out of the spring. So that's why I'm picking him. Kyle, I hope that's a sufficient answer.
Russ, I think that's a great answer. I was thinking about him. A local kid came to mind at the tight end position.
Toby Payne.
And I don't know. I don't. Maybe I'm not as non-committal, and I didn't put as much thought into it. I'll be completely honest. Your breakdown was very, very logical and very good. I was trying to think more of off the cuff, and but I think that was an astute observation.
Well, let's hope that we have several, that just have breakout years and everything. I mean, we've got the talent that we brought in. I saw Antonio Harmon that we're kind of high on. He's a former wide receiver that became a tight end and then in the SEC and now is back as wide receiver. He's definitely got the tools and the size to do so. Toby Payne, you mentioned. There's some speedsters at the slot position and wide receiver. There's some mismatches out on the field that can do it. There's some running backs that are really good. I just feel like this offense is going to be a more by the committee, take what's available, throw it when you got it, sling it when you got it, run it when you got it, take advantage of what's there. I think that we're going to see a lot of players being more of the workhorses and role players instead of somebody being the workhorse of like a Rasheen Ali that is your definite number one back.
All right. What do you think the Marshall Athletic Department needs to do to secure more fans in the stands for football?
What a great question.
Loaded question.
Yes, a loaded question, but a great question. And I think that there is no real one overall answer. I think there's a bunch of answers of little small things they could do. Number one, I think that they have got to get the word out more about tickets. And, social media is not the only way. I think that they need to do, more like, I'm not talking about old school phone trees, but, like crowdsourcing, viral things, things to get it out there. Every single person in the tri-state area that's within 45 minutes of driving to the game, you could even say an hour. But, if you go an hour this way, you're a lot closer to Lexington. If you go an hour this way, you're closer up toward Columbus. An hour this way, you're headed down toward Tennessee, Virginia Tech, WVU. So I think in that small 45 minutes around here, you're not going to get everybody. There's a lot of Ohio State fans as soon as you go across the border. There's a lot of UK and Louisville fans as soon as you cross the border, a lot more UK than Louisville. There are a lot of fans in West Virginia that cheer on West Virginia simply because it has the name of the state in there, and they've been 1A or now FBS for uninterrupted a long time, and they've just had their fans built in. There's nothing wrong with any of that, but the people around here that either cheer on Marshall or don't really have a team but want to go because it's the closest place and might become fans, I think they have to have what we talked about in last 2 days episode, that family pack, $99 for four. So it's $396 total for a family of four or a friendship of four, $16.50 a game to go to. And you can go and you can park, in Huntington and walk. It's not like you've got to go walk 3 miles like you do at some of the other schools that I've been to. You can go and park for free, walk, tailgate with other people. Hell, you can tailgate with the ThunderCast, and you can go to a game for $16.50. That needs to be spread. We need to do things at the game that make the game fun. I think that we 100% have to do the ads and the promotions that we do, but I think that we need to invest and build up our band. You know, you go to some of these other games and the band is a true highlight. Definitely now that you have to stay and can't leave the stadium and come back in, I think you need to have some halftime entertainment. I think they need to lower concession prices a little bit on some things. Have it to be, if you are a Big Green member, that you get a lower price. If I can go because I'm a Big Green member and I can get Austin's ice cream for cheaper down at Austin's, I should be able to go and get a beer for cheaper, or a hot dog for cheaper, popcorn for cheaper, or something inside the stadium. I think that they can do a lot of that stuff to make it cheaper, make the environment better. We need to promote the hell out of Marshall football. Not a one overall big answer. I think there are many things. You may have 70 more that I didn't mention. I've got 70 that I didn't mention, but I think those right there are a start.
Yeah, I agree. And so since you took short-term approach, I'm going to take long-term approach, I think, because I think that's part of it as well. So, building of the, and I wanted to look up these numbers because that was the one question I saw that was asked, and I didn't have a chance to look at the numbers. But what I wanted to do was, and if somebody can do this and wants to comment, please do, but compare App State to us, in the sense of, why is it that they sell out every single year their season tickets in a town the size of Boone, when we can't sell out our stadium in a town that has a 300,000 metro population.
Right? I can tackle that a little bit. So Boone is obviously too. If you look at the surrounding area, they're not just going to be 20,000, just like Marshall's. Not limited to Huntington being 41,000 or whatever. You mentioned the tri-state area of 300 some thousand. Well, they have a high population of App State fans over in the Charlotte area, and it's not a terrible drive over for them. They have a culture there to where their student section shows up and shows out. Their fans show up and show out. It's a culture thing. It's been there for a long time. We kind of had that for a while, and then it fell off during the Conference USA era. And you have to understand, App State was in that regional rivalry type deal where we were not. We had freaking UTEP, UTSA, North Texas, a lot of other teams too. But you think about having 5,000 opposing fans coming to the Joan. We don't want that. We want them all to be Herd fans. But you're not going to see 5,000 coming from UTEP. You're not going to see 5,000 coming from UTSA. You're not going to see 5,000 coming from Southern Miss. Now with the recent rivalry that exploded on social media, you might see that in the coming years. But you're just not going to see that. And down at App State, they always had that more regional stuff in the Southern Conference that they were in, that Marshall was in years and years before that. And then when they moved up, they were never bouncing around in one of these mega conferences that was spread from coast to coast or 15 hours away and things like that. Another thing that they did, they played North Carolina at Boone. And when that game happened, they made you get season tickets to be able to get a ticket to that game. You had to be a season ticket holder. And that was to prevent North Carolina from basically coming in and just saying, hey, we're going to buy up all these single game tickets and make it a North Carolina home game for us. Well, they had the foresight to not only say you had to be a season ticket holder, but you had to be a season ticket holder for 2 years. So you had to buy 2 years worth of season tickets just to guarantee that you had a ticket to that game. Well, that gave them 2 years of sellouts. They've done 2 additional years of sellouts since then, 4 years in a row that they've sold out. I may have that wrong. They may be at 5. It may have been within the last 3 years that they've done the additional sellouts instead of those 2. I think that I'm correct on there. But there's a lot of different factors that went into them selling out. But they had the culture already in place. They've had consistent winning in place. They had North Carolina coming and visiting them, which they said, okay, 2 years worth of tickets just to get it. We can't do that if Purdue comes here. We can't do that if it's anybody, even Virginia Tech. You can't do that. Louisville, you can't do that. I don't think UK you can do that. WVU is the only team that you can do that. And in North Carolina, they can do that for UNC. They can do it for probably NC State. They might be able to do that for Wake Forest. They've got a lot of different options they can do that. But over here, we've only got WVU because the other fans around here, Ohio State is not coming here.
Right.
We could definitely do that if Ohio State would come here. But I could also go over to my magical unicorn out in the yard and get my $8 million a day that I'd just go over for rubbing his head. Hence, It ain't going to happen. I think that they just had a bunch of different things. They already built on what they were doing with their attendance, and then they've amped it up here in the last 4 to 5 years. And the kickstart of that was that UNC have to buy 2 years worth of season tickets. Once you already are in that process of being a season ticket holder and that demand is now there, that's more that you're going to hold on to those tickets as well. So they created demand. They were already in a good starting spot. They've sustained that demand. We had to have something very similar. We're just going to have to build it slightly different. You got to understand too, they're only at 30,000, and even though they have more that will be built on, it's going to be more like suites being built on, and
not
we were
stadium capacity.
We were over 38,000, and we were that way for 2 decades. And it's because and actually more than 2 decades, but we had to build that before the 2000 with those bleachers that have been the upper end zone bleachers that were put in for an NCAA rule that did not come to fruition. So we actually had seats that we didn't need and could have built it like they were. Whereas ours looks a lot different if you're putting 27 in a 38,000 stadium than they were putting 27 in a 30,000 stadium.
Right. Well, that's true. It makes it look fuller. And I don't have those numbers to see, those attendance numbers. I should have done some more research on that. But I think the long-term play is, making it, to the points that you made, Russ, making it affordable, making sure people, because we've got to inspire the next generation to be herd fans. One of the things that we've, and I don't want to spend way too much time on this particular question, but one of the things that we know is we do have an aging fan base. Mm-hmm. And if we're not replacing those diehard fans with new diehard fans, then it's going to continue to bleed. To your so long term is, I think you need to grow your enrollment. Marshall is now seeing a little bit of increase in enrollment and things like that. You got to you got to have Marshall graduates, right? You got to have people coming to Marshall whose parents, who maybe weren't herd fans before or herd fans now because their kid goes to Marshall. I know this is anecdotal, but I know a family who is an App State. Either they're App State fans because their kids went to App State. They're from the Charlotte area, mm-hmm. but their kids go to App State. They weren't App State fans before, as far as I'm aware, but they're App State fans now. Why? Well, because their kids went there. So increasing enrollment can increase the ability for increased fan base that way, whether it's through new programs, things of that nature. Growing the area is another one. This is one that I've talked about with a lot of people. is, you need to bring in industry, you need to bring in jobs like a new core that's going to provide, those higher paying jobs. So you've got the resources to spend your weekends going to football games, spend your, have that, disposable income to be Big Green members and things like that. So you got to grow the area and grow the community, grow industry, grow business. It's a multifaceted problem. And I know the athletic department's not responsible for that, but the university as a whole and the town as a whole, that has an effect as well on the attendance of games, especially if you continue to bleed population because of lack of jobs, things of that. So it's a very multifaceted problem, that I don't think there's a one size fits all solution with it, but making the game day the quick fix. I think the quick answer is what they've been working on, making game day experience better, making it easier to get to, and well, they haven't done this very well, in and out of concessions very well, but you make that easier, you make the game day experience more fun, make it that's what you're doing when Saturdays come and there's a home game at Marshall University, at Joan C. Edwards stadiums. That's where you're at. That's where you're going, and that's going to take some time to build that culture back.
I don't have the game by game and year by year attendance, but let me just roll through this real quick. They had from 1962 to 1978, their capacity was 10,000. From 79 to 94, 18,000. You got to understand, I mean, we played them a lot in those 90s.
Yeah, ton.
And,
ton
and 80s. And their capacity was 18. From 95 to 2007, I mean, we're talking about, we've been in 2 years of conference, or 3 seasons of Conference USA. It went down to 16,650. Then in 2008, it jumped up to 20,150. 9 and 10 is 21,650. 2011, 23,150. 2012 to 2016, 24,050. And then 2017 to present is 30,000. So they have built it incrementally. So it's an apples and oranges thing. I know you didn't intend to just, compare like that, but they have built that demand over the years with some consistent good football, but it was also always a hot ticket to get when you could only get 18,000, and you've got 20,000 in the town, that's a lot. Plus, like I said, from the surrounding areas that are coming. So they have always been a hotter ticket to get, and just that culture of, hey, we win a lot of football games, especially here at home, and we have a harder ticket to get. It just makes it to where it's a natural thing that you're going to be closer to your capacity and sell out those tickets because the demand is there. When you have a lot of people, we just talked about in our last episode about season tickets are on sale for us, and I'm telling people not to go to SeatGeek and stuff like that. I still run across people that's like, hey, I paid $300 for these on SeatGeek. And I'm like, why? Why did you do that? Get season tickets from us. And then, that helps with everything. It helps us, but it also helps create that demand.
Right. And I agree. And when we went to that 38,000 capacity, there was only a handful of times that we ever hit it.
Yeah.
And so you want to create that demand. And I'm not saying we shrink the stadium or anything like that. And I'm not saying putting the tarps in the end zone was the greatest idea either. But you've got to, you got to understand, how many can you draw, right?
Yeah.
We've got tons of people that come in from out of town, and they can't do that every Saturday.
That's right.
A lot of times they pick homecoming or they pick opening game of the year, to come into the game. That's why there's a lot of times those games are more full.
You go to Florida, you go to Charlotte, you go over on the Richmond and further coastal on Virginia. You go get in an airport just about anywhere, wear a Marshall shirt. You're going to hear somebody yell, "Go Herd," and you're going to talk to them. It's like, "Oh yeah, I've been living here for a long time." You can't throw a dead cat in Charlotte or Florida without hitting a bunch of Herd fans. You look over in the Cincinnati area, Columbus area, we've got a lot of Herd fans. We've got some Big Green chapters around all those places. and the DC Metro. There's a lot up there. So our fans are spread out, and a lot of that is once they get a degree, you've got to leave. Like you're talking, there's no industry around here, so they had to move their families and things. I just don't think that you have it as much where at App State they can go to Asheville's not that far away. Charlotte's not that far away. Raleigh's not that far away. So they can get back there a lot easier for these games. So even though the town of Boone is smaller than the town of Huntington, I feel like their alumni base is a lot more compact than ours because you just don't see people saying, "Oh, I'm going to go get this really great job in Lee Tart, West Virginia, that's only 35 minutes away from Huntington." You end up saying, "I had to move my family to Tampa. I had to move my family to Orlando. I had to move my family to Charlotte."
Yeah. And that's with the university and the town, and this is we need to have 5 episodes on this, but working towards building the university to draw more people, to draw business here, draw industry, that's I think growing the area is going to help some of that. And we don't have to, we're preaching to the choir here. You can look over the history of this area and seeing the decline from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, all the way through this era due to the the moving out of the industry and things like that. So, but there's been I'm not going to say a resurgence, but there's been an effort where we're trying to take some of that and bring some of that back, and that's going to help with the attendance because you're going to have people here, hopefully, that are graduating from the university and getting jobs here or getting jobs an hour or two down the road, not halfway across the country.
Yeah, I think you nailed it with the enrollment and the other stuff that Marshall's doing as well. Cybersecurity, the pharmacy school is still relatively new. The engineering complex is still relatively new. You got all the business stuff that is going down the corridor of 4th Avenue that's going to be breaking up here in the next 5 years. You're going to see several more things bust out down through there. That's all going to help because it's going to increase those alumni bases, but it's also hopefully going to be industries that will also be supported around here as well, that people can stay in the area or be closer than to say, well, now I live in Denver and I have to try to see if I can come back to one game every 3 years.
You go to local industry, that's more donors too.
Yeah. This next one, the thoughts on the new basketball court designs you and I talked about on this last episode. But the second question that they had was, what old football chants do you wish would come back? I was racking my brain on some things because several of them I don't want to say what we chanted as students. One of them, there was a transposing of the first letters for Toledo, but and Little Miami. So not things like that. Mm-hmm. So it's hard for me to say because I feel like we still do the let's go herd, let's go herd, let's go herd, and we are Marshall. But you and I are in agreement. I know that instead of bringing a bunch of old chants back that I'm not really familiar that we might have let go by the wayside, I think you and I are in agreement that we need to increase and take back how we used to do some of those chants, like we are Marshall, and get them more coordinated, more frequently, and as loud as they have ever been.
Yeah, it still kills me to this day how some people don't know the procedure for We Are Marshall. Who's responsible for the We Are, who's responsible for Marshall. Maybe getting that better. In tandem, working better, and more often. And maybe I'm wrong. I don't think I'm not saying we do it all game or we should do it all game, but I don't think we there's maybe one good We Are Marshall chant in a game.
Yeah, and it used to be over the last few years. Used to be a lot more organic, and it was a couple of things happened in my opinion. So it used to be the stadium was only one side and the other side, and then the end zone kind of, in 93 they did the lower bowl to make it 30,000 in the end zone. It was 28, on the two sides, and then the suites have grown over the years. We've gotten more suites over there on the press box side, and a lot of fans. I think that people don't realize when they're counting like how many fans are in attendance, just how many people are up there unseen. You can look around and see, how many we have there, and you're gauging, here's how many we have, but there's a lot up there. Well, they're not doing the "We Are Marshall" chant because they are inside the glass. We expanded that end zone, and man, this is the second point that we've talked about, that upper end zone, but it just killed us. And we didn't need to do it, but we had to do it at the time because the rule was if you didn't have 35, I think it was, thousand, you couldn't be in 1A or what is now known as FBS. And then we get them built and they go, we changed our mind. It didn't pass. So we did that anyway, and that kind of diluted those from the side to move over. And all it did was spread everybody out. But it should be, if you were there and you're on the home side of the scoreboard, you're with that side. And if you're on the away side of the scoreboard, you're with that side. And you can still do it, but you're still coming from three different directions. And there was a lot of people that were doing both sides of the chant. Things just got away because of the spreading out. I feel like the natural increase of ads has also, it's just it's a part of it. You have to take time to do this, but during the game, especially while we're on defense, we need to break out the "We Are" and Marshall. We need to be as loud as we can. And it used to happen a lot more. And I have some ideas, and I'm going to go, I'm in the grand scheme of things, nobody, but I do have relationships to talk with some of the people over there. I have some ideas for fan interaction. "We Are Marshall" is one of them. And there's another thing with the song "Thunderstruck" that's one of them. Stay tuned. I'm hoping to talk to some people that could make some things happen. But my idea is this summer we just have some videos produced of getting everybody on the same page, because wouldn't it be great if everybody's on the same page to do the "We Are Marshall"? Wouldn't it be great if everybody's on the same page as every time we do a kickoff, every time that we get a first down? How many different first down chants are we doing in the stadium? It's a bunch,
Yeah, it is.
So if we're all doing the same thing at the same time, that's how you get loud. You look down at Virginia Tech, if only half that stadium was bouncing to Enter Sandman and not singing along, it wouldn't be near as big at Virginia Tech at Lane Stadium, what they're doing. South Carolina, what they do when they come out, these stadiums get rocking. And that creates that environment that I think goes back to another earlier question of increasing attendance. Because, man, if it's fun on game day and you're loud on game day and you're dominating and winning all the time because your crowd is that 12th man, that is going to help a lot too.
Yeah. Makes it fun. Yeah, it makes it fun. And there's been times where, and I'll admit, there's been times where it's been kind of dead.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like that idea, having something consistent that everybody knows what to do and when to do it, and then you get involved with it, and it makes it fun. I like that.
Stay tuned.
All right, stay tuned. All right, moving on. Thoughts on the upcoming Tri-State Coldcat season and how the team benefits the Huntington community.
Real quick, I just want to say that the Coldcats being here gives us something that you don't have to drive to Cincinnati to watch a baseball game. You don't have to drive to Charleston to watch a minor league game. You can watch it right here, a Wooden Bat League. You've got some local flavor of this year 3 Marshall players on the roster. but it gives you something to do. And it's the Tri-State Coldcats, not the Huntington Coldcats. So you have some inclusion of that Proctorville, Chesapeake, South Point, even as far over as Ironton and maybe even Portsmouth coming over to watch games. And then you've got all the areas around Ashland, Louisa, that sort of thing. And then, over here on the West Virginia side, the tri-state area. And it's a place for somebody that within 30 minutes they can go and watch a game. While they're here, they're going to eat at our restaurants. They're going to fuel up with fuel while they're here. It's going to be an economic driver. So I think it does well with the community. I think they are also very active on social media and trying to get out there more to interact with fans, because that's kind of like that minor league baseball feel. Those teams have always done that. So I think that it is great for the community, but it is going to take another couple of years before it really hits its stride. But I think this year is going to be a big boost off of last year. Just my opinion.
Yeah, I think so too. I'd like to see, continue to grow it. I've heard of, people talk about, the complaints of, we used to have some minor league stuff here, and, we had some baseball, had hockey, you had some things, and, it's kind of a start of bringing some of that back. Well, if we want that stuff to continue, well, we have to participate in it, and we have to continue. We actually have to be involved and pay for tickets and go to games, and I think that's great. I will admit that I did not go to a game last season. There's a lot of running around, a lot of personal things I had going on, but I'd like to see it, continue to go, and I fully plan on going this season.
Yeah.
I think it's a great evening or afternoon activity that you can go to the field. It's being, it's utilizing facilities that, normally would sit dormant, for, the rest of the year. I think it's good for the community, as long as it can, sustain itself and people actually participate in it. And I hope that they are.
Next for me, reading one says, thoughts on the response of WVU fans for Tony Gibson wanting to play WVU. My thoughts on WVU fans are always usually the same, but I do want to say there were several that I saw that were for the game being played, and they were very civil about it. And they said, hey, I'd like to cheer on Marshall when WVU's not playing them. I want Marshall to succeed, and I think it's great for the state. It would be great for Huntington. It would be great for WVU at Morgantown. So there were some reasonable fans. There were your usual WVU fans that, have the closest they've ever came to the stadium was seeing it on TV, that did a lot of commenting online. I have no love for that. I have no love for how I've been treated up there at WVU when I've gone up there as a fan of the school that I went to, for no other reason than they're just wanting to be an ass to somebody, and that they think that somehow makes them better than us as fans, not as teams, or that somehow gives their team a heads up on the field, over us when we're going up there. And it's not just us. I used to follow WVU in junior high and high school, grade school, all that stuff. And I'll never forget that there was a player in what they called the pit up at Morgantown that was in the ambulance that had been hurt, and they tried to turn the ambulance over. And it was a Miami player, if I remember correct. So I really don't have a lot of love for WVU fans. So this is a very loaded question for me. I'm going to take the stance that they were overwhelmingly wrong in saying that, well, we should never play in Huntington. If we do, it should be like a 5-2 or 3-1 or something like that. They think that it's insane for us to play a 1-1, but they're going to Ohio to play a 1-1, or even playing a 2-1 at Ohio or whatever. You're going to freaking Athens, Ohio to play them. And they're like, well, it helps with recruiting. You as WVU need to go to Athens, Ohio to help your
To recruit
recruiting.
players.
Yeah. Bull crap, man. Whatever.
I-
They can tell themselves whatever they want. They know that eventually Marshall, no matter if we're up that year, down that year, whatever, is going to win. The more that we play, the more that we're going to beat them. We came close in 2010 and should have won that game, and that's probably the number one game that I hate that got away from us. There are other seasons that we didn't play them that we probably would have monkey stomped them.
Yeah.
They were down, we were up. And when we started that series back to play them, we were extremely down, and they were on the rise up to the point where they blew a chance to play for the national championship. And we were in the bottom 10 on ESPN.com week after
Yep.
week. So they can't tell me that, one, they think that they will, just because they are 12-0, going back to the games that were played when helmets weren't even invented, that would continue in perpetuity. They are scared to death that they would lose to Marshall, and
Absolutely.
they don't want to play. The reaction from me is, I don't want to play. I could not care any less about playing WVU, and it has nothing to do with them being 12-0. It has everything to do with, I don't care for their fans as a majority, not every single one of them. I've got some dear friends that are WVU fans. I do not want to be in the situation where you see them making inappropriate jokes, and we all know what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
off limit topics. I don't want to be in a situation where I go to Morgantown like I did in the 2000s and have a beer come flying at me that is like 90% full and hit at my feet, and then a 6-year-old girl come up and flip me off and say F you, and her dad slapping his knee, pointing like, oh man, that's great, I sent her up there to do that. No, I want to go and be hospitable with other people, and I can't do that with them.
Yeah. Every fan base has delusional people, but the delusion in the WVU fan base runs very, very high. Again, I'm with you. I have friends that are WVU fans, but the delusion that runs through that fan base is just something that I've not seen in anywhere else in college football, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because we're in close proximity to them, geographically. But what they don't want to admit is that over the last few decades, I mean, I'm going to say even the last 30 years, there's been a lot more parity between our two programs from a skill level standpoint than there has been great differences. To that point being, if we played this, let's say we played this series consistently for the last 30 years, we don't notch 1 or 2 wins. We notch, yeah, they still may carry it, right?
Yeah.
They should. They're the Power 4, Power 5 school. They're in a bigger conference.
A
They
lot
should
more
win those games.
money.
A lot more money. They should win those games more often. But the truth of the matter is, they wouldn't win every single game every time
That's right.
if we played that series consistently. And they don't want to admit that we're closer to them than they want to believe. We're little brother down here in the corner of side of West Virginia, and they don't want to admit that. Well, because we can show it in other sports. We beat them in soccer. We've beat them several times in basketball when we played those series. We beat them we beat them in baseball. We beat them in other sports. They were really, really good this year, and we still nabbed a game out of them in baseball. So,
Yeah.
with that being said, yes, they should win those games on a purely financial standpoint. With all the resources, yeah, they should win those games more than they lose. But the truth of the matter is, they will lose, and they would have lost those games, many games, in my opinion, because they're, like you said, there were years that we were up and they were down. That's the nature of the game. But they're scared to play. I see where, all that to say, I see where Tony Gibson's coming from.
Sure, I do.
I get
Yeah.
what he's saying. I think there is positivity to that if it can be done right, because it
Yeah.
brings, it's a, why does App State play UNC? You know, why does Louisville play UK? I understand why they do those things and why he would want to do that here. But I don't see concessions being made from them up there to do it, even just a 2-1 or a 1-1, because they're going to want that 3-1 or what have you. Because
Tell me how well the 4-7 1999 team would have done against the top 10 ranked herd that was undefeated. It would not have been good. I think we probably took them in 98. We came really close in our very first game in 1997 back in 1A. That was our first game back, and we're playing at WVU, and we were up until they scored 2 late touchdowns to take the lead back and then ice the game. At 98, man, if Moss would have stayed in 98, we would have smoked him. But even with him leaving, our offense kind of diversified itself a little bit because we started, not having to just have Moss be the guy. And then 99, we would have taken him. 2000, hard to say, then you start looking at 01, 02, 03. It would have been really, really good to see Leftwich going against them, and our defense was nasty. They started getting a little bit better again around that time, but really, we start playing them again in like 05 or whatever, where they are way up and we are at the bottom. That's the worst we've been. And they want to use that as the point to say, oh, it would always be 57-20 or whatever.
No,
it wouldn't.
It wouldn't have been, and we would have won several games. That's how that plays out. Because Marshall's a great football brand. For quite a long time now. I mean, you see all the time these great G5. You call them, if we want to call them G5 football brands that are really good, go and smoke a Power 5, Power 4 school. It happens because there's a lot of parity between the mid to upper G5 and the mid to lower P5, P4. There's not a big world of difference. And then again, some years you're up, some years you're down. It just so happened that when we played them, that's how we threw a couple games away, and they dominated us in a few others, and that's how that rolled. So all that to say, to answer the question 20 minutes later, is the response from WV fans is, I guess that's the question. Most of it laughable.
Yeah.
Just because the ego.
Yeah.
The ego behind, a team that's not been relevant for quite some time now. So
let's go to the next one. I'm going to ask you, should there be pep rallies before home games, especially that first home game?
I think that if you do them, I'm not opposed to them. But I don't think you do them every game. I think that's a lot to do every game. But for that first game, I wouldn't be opposed to something like that. I think that would be.
We do it at homecoming. So let's say we add that for the first game because it's, especially this season, it's the first game for the new regime and everything, kind of kick off that era. I'm not a pep rally guy, but I'm not opposed to them either because there's a lot of people that are pep rally people. And I think even if you get 1,000 people, that's great. If you get 500 people, that's great. Whatever gets excitement going and all that, I'm 100% for. If it's positive for Marshall, I'm for it. I myself just am not that kind of, I generally don't like to be amongst big crowds anyway. And I would just feel kind of like don't want to be there kind of deal. But that's me as an individual, not me as somebody telling everybody else, no, we shouldn't have it. I think if it was planned correctly and everything, they did something, that's great, especially if it adds excitement and gets more attendance going.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm not a big pep rally person either, but I know there are a lot of people that enjoy that. Again, every single game, I don't know about that. Maybe I'm, again, since I'm not part of that part of that crowd, maybe that's something that, kind of helps boost attendance and makes it kind of a whole, part of that game day experience. But opening day, homecoming. I think I'd say try it with opening day. See how that works out. Would lower prices at concessions at baseball encourage better attendance?
Yes. 100%. And I'll tell you another thing too is when you go there for the final series, I don't know how long it had been going on, but only the first base side concessions were open and they weren't on the third base side. And it was an extremely long line to go get. Here I'm 130 some days into not having any alcohol. It wasn't like I was going over there waiting in line to get a beer. There were plenty of people that were, and they had a beer tub out there to try to cut that line down. But these were just people wanting to get a water on an extremely warm day. These were people that were wanting to get something to eat, and they were standing in line. There was one kid, man, he was in front of us, and I didn't even realize it. My wife had overheard it and couldn't stop him in time. He got all the way to the front and sat there. We were in that line for about 35 minutes, and he gets up to the line, and we're talking a young kid, maybe preteen. He gets to the front of the line. They said, "I'm sorry, we don't take cash."
Ooh.
He waited that long, and I mean, I would have bought him. He was just wanting like a drink and a dog or something. You're talking about $7 or something, and I would have said, "Man, don't even worry about it." But I didn't hear it because I was trying to watch the game, and my wife heard it but couldn't get his attention until he was already gone. Yes, lower the prices. We had $3 tickets to go to that last week, that last home series. A lot more people showed up. It was great weather, $3 tickets. If you go and have $2 water, $1 popcorn, $2 dogs, or $1 dogs, and stuff like that, you're going to have a lot more people go. That works for the minor league games. We talked about Buck Night, at the Charleston play. I mean, we would drive to Charleston to go watch a game on Buck Night. $1 dogs, $1 drafts, and I think it was $1 to get in or something. And people will go and they'll spend money, but I don't know how much it costs right now. It's Buddy's Barbecue that has the concessions at baseball only. Sodexo's everywhere else, but baseball only. I don't know what they have to pay to have that, so I don't know the revenue they need back per game. But I feel like attendance would go up if they would lower their concession prices, and I feel like they would have more concession money, not per item, but overall, if they lowered it as well. Because I'm not going to go. I'll just be honest. I'm not going to go there and have a $5 hot dog. That's just a bun and a wiener.
Well, yeah, we know what drives whether it's a restaurant or a game, it's going to be alcohol sales, right?
Yeah.
So you get them low pop water beverage type, low cost there, low dog, low popcorn, low, try to bring that down, keep the beer price where it's at.
Yeah.
And people are still going to buy that. And, you increase your crowd by 10, 20%, I would argue or think that you could offset the lower food costs by the alcohol sales, because that's going to, because someone's still going to buy at least one or two, with their, because it's going to be more affordable too, because of the cheaper dog, cheaper food.
Here's how insane my brain works is that I've had to do it, but I don't want to buy a $5 water, but I may buy 5 $2 waters. I would spend more money, but I feel like that going and giving them $5 and, they don't take cash. So, you run it and, it's the culture now, not just there, but everywhere. Do you want to leave a tip? And it's almost that guilt of like, yeah, I'm going to tip them. Well, now I'm paying $7 for a water,
Yeah.
and it's too much. And they need to lower the concession prices. They not just at baseball though. They need to lower it at basketball games. I shouldn't not want to take my family of 5 because I know my little kids of 3 are wanting to go over there and spend $180 on popcorn and and lemonades and things. I shouldn't have to go pay $9 for a lemonade.
Right.
I know these vendors are just trying to make money, but man, they don't have to make that much money. And I feel like they would be busier and make more money overall by lowering the prices and selling more volume instead of at the end of the day saying, "Oh, we got all this popcorn left over."
Right. And it's that whole we've got you trapped in here, so we're
Yeah.
going to jack
Yeah.
up the price. Well, then people aren't just going to come,
Yeah.
and I think that's part of it, because again, a family of five, same with me. When I bring my family, I know for a fact the little one, my littlest one, she wants cotton candy. She wants something, the snacks. My older ones want the snacks. They want their own drinks. They want their own, waters or whatever. I mean, dude, I've dropped $60 at a baseball game, or more. And it's just I can't I can't do that, game in, game out. There's just
Yeah.
no way. Sorry, we're just gonna have to tough it out till we get home. You know.
Let's go to this next one. Down another one about the heaters. What about
Yeah.
heaters at the baseball games to help with attendance on those cold West Virginia winter and early spring evenings?
I I'm just thinking of the logistics of that. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you might be able to put heaters up like on the concourse
Yeah.
area or maybe
Mm-hmm.
outside the in the concession lines. That's possible. I don't know if I think there's outside heaters upstairs on the suites if I'm not mistaken. Um, so you could probably do something like that because we went to, oh gosh, what game was that? We went to a game and it was me and I had a bunch of people with us and it was cold. It was frigid. I had my kids there. I can't remember what game that was, but a heater would have been nice. But I just don't know the logistics of heaters above the
Yeah.
seats. I just don't know how that would work.
Yeah, it'd be hard in the lower seats. The concourse having some warming stations might be nice or
Mhm.
whatever, but I think too it would become quickly crowded, and there's also a potential of people like bumping into them and them being hot or things like that. That they probably wouldn't be able to do it. I think that it's a nice um idea, and I think the only places you can do it is probably that upper deck seating and everything to do some outdoor heaters there that are I don't know rectangular and designed for that. They're infrared and that sort of thing.
They're mounted. Yeah.
Yeah, mounted up top and facing down. Those would be real nice, but the majority of the people are sitting down or standing down there. And I don't know unless they could mount near the bathrooms, they could mount some big heaters facing down on the concourse. Um, I just don't know how much it would heat down there in the seats. Uh, it's brutal, man, in February and March and sometimes
Yeah.
April and sometimes May here.
Sometimes they. Yeah.
But it's one of those things that the cost, the logistics, the would it even work kind of thing probably outweighs the man. It'd be great if we could have them.
Yeah. Same.
All right, you've got the last one here for us about Sunbelt.
All right. Which Sunbelt related accounts do you enjoy interacting with the most and why?
Well, I'm going to take it Twitter and in real life. And they're the same. JMU Sound Off, I'll mention them first because they don't really have a Twitter presence anymore. I think that they have gone away from that and they're doing more social media elsewhere, for their stuff. But I love interacting with those guys. Um, the same with the ODU Monarchists. They're also really great people. So both of those podcasts, we have come to tailgate with them when they're there. When they come here, they tailgate with us. We talk throughout the year, kind of talk shop of, hey, how can we elevate each other and what can here's something that I did that you guys may want to do. And I've sure copied some of the stuff that they want to do. I also really enjoy talking to the Sunbelt Syndicate, Dominic Crissetto in particular. They do a phenomenal job and they are constantly having content put out, and they've got a whole team of people, and they do it for every sport. And they do a great job. Dominic's also somebody that I've talked to a lot. And then SBC Ref on Twitter is who asked this. And the former SBC Ref, Chad Dickens, is somebody that I absolutely adore talking to. Great in person. I text him all the time with some stuff, and he'll shoot me some text. Over on Facebook, we're joking with people. On Twitter, we're joking with people. Chad's just a really good dude, man. Anybody that knows Chad from any Sunbelt school and some non-Sunbelt schools, they know Chad, and he's really fun. And the new SBC Ref has kind of carried on that joking with everybody tradition, and I enjoy talking to that individual as well. Just a lot. I have a lot of fun in the Sun Belt. I generally don't get into the trash talking stuff, but I really, really love the interactions with the fans, that we can give each other some jabs in a fun way and all that, but nothing's ever malicious. And last but not least, this guy's from JMU. He just like Chad, threw out the red carpet when I went down to JMU. Chad was at Southern Miss, by the way. Jake Coons, and we have now started doing some interacting. He started this company, the Dead Meat Society, and we're actually going to do some stuff with this podcast and our tailgates with Dead Meat Society. But man, you talk about the red carpet when I went down to JMU at Harrisonburg. He really, really rolled it out, and he's a good guy to interact with. He and a bunch of his friends came to our tailgate when JMU played the Thursday night game up here a couple of years ago, and they were just fun the whole time to be around, and he's good people too. So hopefully SBC Ref, that's enough people, because I like to interact with a lot of people on Twitter and through text and stuff, but that's some gems right there.
Yeah, no, that's good. You see me on social media. I have almost no presence on social media. That's something that I'm looking to change, try to get more involved and interact and things like that. Most of those accounts that you mentioned, I've met most of those guys, and they're really cool. So I'm more of what they call a lurker, on social media. So I'm pretty aware of what's going on. I don't interact a ton. I will say that I really do like the Sun Belt Conference as a whole compared to where we came from, because of that, right? The fan interaction, the funny memes, the good jabs, right? The ingest, the having fun jabs and things like that. I think it's a good fun community. Yeah. And I do enjoy, even though I don't interact with it that much. Which again, I want to change. Being here on the podcast and being with you guys has kind of pulled me out of my shell, so to speak. And so I want to interact more with these guys. But it's fun. It is very fun. Group of people that very passionate fan bases, and there are people. So
yeah. Jed, that does it for an amazing dip into our mailbag. Hadn't done that in a long time. You and I didn't plan on it going an hour and a half, but there were that many questions, and we got into some good discussion on there. And I hope that thank everybody that submitted a question. I hope we answered them to your liking, or if we didn't, we at least gave our opinions on it. So drop some comments below on how you agree, how you disagree. And other than that, we're going to catch up with you next week. And then KD and I are coming at you very soon as well. So you're going to get a lot of content out of the Thundercast in the next few weeks. But with that, Jed, I'm going to say, whether you see us at the Jack, whether you see us at the Joan, whether you see us on a 1.5 hour mailbag session, no matter where you see us, we're going to be saying, go Herd. It's the Thundercast, and we'll see you later.
Go Herd.